I stared at my phone screen, certain the banking app was malfunctioning. $23,000. Gone. Completely wiped out from my business account that just Friday had contained everything I needed for Monday's payroll and our overdue equipment loan payment. My hands shook as I refreshed the app again, praying for a different result. The weekend had been perfect. Sarah's family reunion at our house, everyone laughing and celebrating, thanking me for finally being able to host after years of struggle. But now, standing in my kitchen Monday morning, I realized the horrible truth. Someone had robbed me blind while I slept under my own roof. 3 days earlier, our house had buzzed with excitement as Sarah's family arrived for their annual reunion. After 5 grueling years of building my construction company, reliable foundations, from nothing, I finally had something to show for it. The new house, the stable income, the respect I'd earned in our small Texas community. I was proud to host this gathering for the first time. Sarah's parents drove in from Houston. Her brother Marcus and his wife Linda brought their 2 teenagers from Dallas, and her sister Janet came with her 3 kids from Austin. 22 people total, filling every corner of our 4-bedroom home with laughter and stories. I fired up the grill Saturday afternoon, watching Marcus toss a football with his son Brad, while Sarah and her sisters prepared sides in the kitchen. Everything seemed perfect. Marcus even complimented my business success, asking detailed questions about my construction contracts and how I managed cash flow. I felt foolish now, remembering how I'd proudly explained my system of keeping operating funds easily accessible for quick equipment purchases and emergency payroll needs. The weekend flew by in a blur of barbecue smoke, birthday cake for Sarah's niece Emma, and late-night card games. Sunday evening, as everyone packed their cars and exchanged hugs goodbye, I felt a deep satisfaction. I'd provided something special for my wife's family, proving I belonged among them after years of feeling like the outsider who couldn't quite measure up. But Monday morning shattered that illusion completely. I checked my business account routinely before heading to the bank to withdraw payroll for my 8 employees. Instead of the expected $23,000, the balance showed 0, not even 50 cents remaining. My stomach dropped as I frantically called First National Bank, certain their system had glitched. The customer service representative's voice remained professionally neutral as she confirmed multiple large cash withdrawals throughout the weekend. 3 separate transactions of $7,000 each, plus 1 final withdrawal of $2,000 Sunday evening, all made using my business debit card with the correct PIN. Impossible. My business card never left the safe in my home office, secured behind a combination lock only Sarah and I knew. I'd installed that safe specifically to protect important documents and the cash reserves that kept my company running smoothly. Racing to my office, I found the safe hanging open, empty except for scattered papers. My business debit card was gone. Someone had not only known the combination, but had taken the time to carefully photograph or copy every piece of financial information inside. When Sarah returned from dropping Emma at school, I confronted her with shaking hands and a voice tight with panic. Her face crumpled immediately, tears streaming down her cheeks as she collapsed into our kitchen chair. "Edward, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "My family, they knew about your success, about the money you keep accessible. They've been struggling so much with Dad's medical bills." Before I could process her words fully, Marcus's pickup truck pulled into our driveway. He strolled through our front door without knocking, his wife Linda behind him, both wearing expressions of casual indifference that made my blood boil. "Morning, Edward," Marcus said, settling into my living room like he owned the place. "Sarah mentioned you had some concerns about your bank account." I stood over him, fists clenched. "Where's my money, Marcus? Every damn penny of it." He leaned back in my chair and actually smiled. "We needed it more than you do. Simple as that." The casual cruelty in his voice hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't some desperate act of survival. This was calculated theft, planned and executed while enjoying my hospitality, sleeping in my guest rooms, eating food I'd provided. "You stole from me," I said, my voice barely controlled. $23,000. That's my employees' paychecks, our loan payment, everything. Marcus shrugged. "Look around, Edward. You've got this nice house, successful business, more money coming in every month. Dad's facing bankruptcy because of his cancer treatments. Mom's about to lose the house she's lived in for 30 years. We took what we needed to help family. I stared at him, incredulous. By stealing from family? By redistributing resources where they're needed most, Linda added, her voice sharp with self-righteousness. Don't be selfish, Edward. This is what families do for each other. The audacity of their words left me speechless. They'd violated my home, stolen my livelihood, and somehow convinced themselves they were the victims. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake, my 60-year-old foreman, asking when he could pick up his paycheck. Jake supported his disabled wife on his construction wages. Without his Monday check, they'd struggle to afford her medications. Marcus stood to leave, adjusting his jacket with infuriating calm. Don't make this complicated, Edward. Consider it a loan. We'll pay you back when things improve. As they walked toward the door, Sarah grabbed my arm. Please, Edward. They're family. Dad's cancer. Mom's situation. We can't destroy them over money. I watched Marcus's truck disappear down our street, carrying with it my employees' livelihoods, my business stability, and my faith in the people I'd called family. The perfect weekend had been nothing but an elaborate setup, and I'd been too blind with pride to see it coming. My hands trembled as I called Jake to explain that payroll would be delayed. His disappointed silence cut deeper than any angry words could have. 7 other employees depended on me, and I'd failed them because I'd trusted the wrong people. But Marcus wasn't finished with his revelations. He returned Tuesday morning with a smugness that made my skin crawl, carrying a manila folder like he was conducting legitimate business. Edward, we need to clear up this misunderstanding, he said, settling again into my living room with Linda beside him. Sarah, come here. Your husband needs to understand the situation. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. I'd barely slept, and she'd spent the night alternating between defending her family and apologizing to me. The foundation of our marriage felt as shaky as everything else in my life. Marcus opened his folder with theatrical precision. Sarah provided us with your safe combination 3 months ago. She was worried about you keeping so much cash around the house, wanted family to know how to access important documents in case of emergency. I turned to stare at my wife, the betrayal hitting fresh and raw. You gave them my combination? Edward. They asked about emergency contacts, about where you kept important papers. I never thought. You never thought they'd steal from us, I finished. But they did. And you helped them do it. Marcus interrupted with a chuckle. Now, that's where you're wrong, brother. This wasn't theft. This was a loan between family members. He produced a sheet of paper bearing my forged signature. The document, dated Saturday evening during the reunion, outlined a $23,000 loan to Sarah's parents for medical expenses, with flexible repayment terms. I never signed this, I said, studying the surprisingly accurate forgery. You were pretty tired Saturday night after all that drinking, Linda added. Don't you remember agreeing to help Dad with his bills? The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Saturday evening, I'd felt unusually drowsy after dinner, despite having only 2 beers. I'd attributed it to exhaustion from hosting, but now I realized they'd drugged me. While I was unconscious, they'd used my limp hand to forge this document, creating legal cover for their theft. You drugged me, I said. The words coming out flat and certain. Marcus's smile widened. That's a serious accusation, Edward. Very serious. The kind of thing that could damage your reputation in this town if you started spreading stories about your wife's family. The threat hung in the air like smoke. In our small Texas community, reputation meant everything. Marcus and Linda owned the hardware store where I purchased materials for every job. One phone call from them could poison my relationships with suppliers throughout the county. Here's how this works, Marcus continued. You're going to accept this loan documentation. You're going to keep quiet about your wild theories. And you're going to be grateful that Sarah has a family willing to help in times of crisis. I felt trapped in quicksand, sinking deeper with every movement. Sarah's tears had become a constant background sound, but she wasn't defending me. She wasn't standing up to her brother's threats. She was caught between her criminal family and her victimized husband, paralyzed by the impossible choice. My employees need their paychecks, I said quietly. Jake's wife needs her medication money. Tommy's got a baby coming next month. These are good people who count on me. And they can keep counting on you, Marcus replied. Just make it work, Edward. Take a loan against your house, tap a credit line, figure it out. That's what successful businessmen do. Linda leaned forward, her voice taking on a false sweetness. Edward, we researched your financial situation thoroughly. Your business grosses over $300,000 a year. You can absorb this temporary setback much easier than Dad can absorb bankruptcy. The calculated nature of their crime became clear. This wasn't desperation or family crisis. This was a targeted robbery, planned for months, executed with precision and malice. They'd studied my finances, identified my vulnerabilities, and struck at the perfect moment. Marcus stood to leave, straightening his jacket. Oh, and Edward? If you're thinking about involving police, remember that document you signed. Hard to claim theft when you've got a signed loan agreement. Plus, Linda works at Lone Star Bank. She's very familiar with fraud investigations and what evidence actually holds up in court. After they left, I sat alone in my violated living room, staring at the forged document. Sarah had retreated to our bedroom, unable to face me. The walls of my own home felt like they were closing in, trapping me with the choice between my integrity and my survival. My phone rang. Jake again, asking about payroll. In the background, I could hear his wife coughing, the wet sound of someone whose lungs were failing. They needed that money for her treatments, her prescriptions, their basic survival. I had built reliable foundations on the principle that a man's word and his work were sacred. Now, faced with the complete betrayal of my wife's family, I had to decide whether those principles were worth destroying everything I'd worked to create. But as I stared at Marcus's forged document, something cold and calculating began to form in my mind. They thought they'd trapped me. They thought their threats and blackmail had neutered any response I might mount. They were about to learn how wrong they were. That evening, I called my old friend Tony Rodriguez, a former Dallas police detective who'd started his own private investigation firm. Tony and I had served together in the Army Reserve, and I trusted him completely. Edward, what you're describing sounds like organized family fraud, Tony said after I explained the situation. This level of planning, the forged documents, the blackmail threats, it's not their first time. What do you mean? Give me 48 hours. I'm going to dig into your brother-in-law's background. If he's done this before, there'll be traces. While Tony investigated, I faced the immediate crisis of meeting payroll. I took a cash advance against my personal credit cards, borrowed against my truck, and scraped together enough to pay my employees. Jake's relief when I handed him his check made the financial pain almost bearable. Tony called Thursday with disturbing news. Edward, your brother-in-law is a serial predator. I found 3 other family members he's stolen from in the past 5 years. Your wife's cousin David lost $37,000 from his father's inheritance 2 years ago. Sarah's elderly Aunt Helen had her retirement savings cleaned out after Marcus visited her last Christmas. Why didn't they report it? Same pattern. Marcus creates loan documents, uses family pressure to keep victims quiet, threatens to destroy relationships if anyone talks. He's been systematically robbing family members for years. The scope of Marcus's crimes staggered me. This wasn't about medical bills or financial crisis. This was a calculated scheme to steal from anyone foolish enough to trust him. There's more, Tony continued. I ran his credit and financial records. Marcus has massive gambling debts at a casino outside Oklahoma City. He owes $43,000 to a loan shark named Vincent Torino. Your money didn't go to medical bills, Edward. It went to cover his gambling losses. That information changed everything. Marcus wasn't a desperate family member trying to save his father. He was an addicted gambler who'd stolen from his cancer-stricken dad's emergency fund and used family medical crisis as cover for his crimes. I spent the weekend developing a plan that would require significant risk, but could expose Marcus completely. Tony helped me create a false business identity called Coastal Development Solutions, complete with temporary bank accounts and fabricated financial statements, showing substantial liquid assets. Monday morning, I began stage 1 of my trap. While Sarah was at work, I had expensive construction equipment delivered to my house, making sure neighbors would notice. I arranged for several large, fake business calls, speaking loudly about million-dollar municipal contracts and discussing my need for investment advice. Sarah noticed the changes immediately. "Edward, what's this equipment doing here? And who were you talking to about all that money?" "Just some new opportunities opening up," I said casually. "The municipal contract situation is looking very promising. I might have more liquid capital than I know what to deal with." Sarah's family had trained her to gather financial intelligence, and she dutifully reported our conversations back to them. Within days, Marcus called requesting a meeting to discuss investment opportunities that might benefit both of us. We met at Ruby's Diner on Thursday afternoon. Marcus arrived with detailed papers about cryptocurrency investments and offshore account opportunities, his eyes bright with greed as he outlined how I could maximize returns on my surplus capital. "Edward, I know we had that misunderstanding last week," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee, "but family should help family succeed. I've got connections that could turn your extra 100,000 into serious wealth." I let him talk, secretly recording every word on my phone. Marcus laid out increasingly elaborate investment schemes, each one designed to give him access to more of my fictional money. He was so focused on his next score that he didn't notice my questions were leading him to admit details about his gambling debts and previous thefts from family members. "The thing is, Marcus," I said, leaning across the diner table, "I'm a careful man. Before I invest with anyone, I like to know everything about their financial situation. I've heard rumors about some gambling problems." His face darkened. "Who told you that?" "Small town, Marcus. People talk. I heard you owe some dangerous people significant money." Marcus glanced around the nearly empty diner, then leaned forward. "Look, Edward, I had some bad luck in Oklahoma City, but that's why I need this investment partnership. Vincent Torino doesn't accept excuses. He wants his money by next Friday, or things get very unpleasant for my family." "How much do you owe him?" $43,000. "But with your investment, I can turn that into enough to pay Vincent and still come out ahead." I nodded sympathetically, knowing I had him exactly where I wanted him. "Marcus, I think we can work something out, but I need to verify some details first. Give me until tomorrow evening, and we'll finalize everything at my house." As Marcus left the diner, practically rubbing his hands together with anticipation, I called Tony with our next steps. Phase 2 of my plan was about to begin, and Marcus had no idea he was walking into a trap 5 months in the making. But first, I had a phone call to make to Vincent Torino. It was time to let Marcus's creditor know exactly where his debtor had been spending his evenings. I placed the call to Vincent Torino from a payphone outside the county courthouse, using information Tony had provided. Vincent's voice carried the flat menace of a man accustomed to collecting debts through intimidation. "Vincent, you don't know me, but I have information about Marcus Thompson. He owes you money, correct?" A long pause. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows where Marcus has been getting his money. He robbed his family this past weekend, took $23,000 from his brother-in-law's business account. He's been bragging about how easy it was. Is that right?" Vincent's interest was clearly piqued. "He's planning another score tomorrow night. Big money this time. Thought you should know he's been holding out on you." I hung up before Vincent could ask questions, but I'd planted the seed I needed. Marcus's life was about to become very complicated. Friday evening, Marcus arrived at my house with Linda and their son Brad. Bringing the teenager was a calculated move, using the boy as an emotional shield against any confrontation. But Marcus had misread the situation completely. "Edward, Linda helped me prepare all the investment paperwork," Marcus said, spreading documents across my dining room table. "Wire transfers, cryptocurrency wallets. Everything's ready for your $50,000 initial investment." I studied the papers, all elaborate fakes designed to steal whatever money I transferred. "Marcus, before we proceed, I need to address something. I know about Vincent Torino." Marcus's face went white. Linda grabbed his arm, her composure cracking. "I know about your gambling debts," I continued. "I know you stole my money to pay Vincent, not to help your father's medical bills. I know you've been robbing family members for years." Marcus shot to his feet, panic replacing his earlier confidence. "Edward, you don't understand the situation. Vincent's people are dangerous. They've threatened Brad, threatened Linda. I had no choice. You had a choice not to gamble away your family's security. You had a choice not to steal from people who trusted you. Linda's voice came out small and frightened. Edward, please, if Vincent doesn't get his money, he'll hurt our children. That's when I revealed my hand. From my kitchen cabinet, I pulled out a manila folder containing copies of everything Tony had discovered. Bank records showing Marcus's gambling transactions, statements from his previous victims, documentation of his systematic theft from family members. I've been investigating you for 2 weeks, Marcus. I know about David's inheritance money, about Aunt Helen's retirement savings, about every person you've robbed, and I've recorded every conversation we've had about your investment schemes. Marcus stared at the evidence, his schemes unraveling before his eyes. What do you want, Edward? I want you to confess to everyone you've stolen from. I want full restitution made to every victim, and I want you to turn yourself in to police. I can't do that. Vincent will kill me if I don't pay him by tomorrow. That's your problem, Marcus. You created this situation. You gambled away money that didn't belong to you, you stole from your own family, and now you're facing the consequences. Marcus's desperation turned to rage. You self-righteous bastard. You think your money makes you better than us? You think you can destroy my family over some temporary loan? $23,000 isn't a loan when it's stolen, Marcus. It's grand theft. And it's not temporary when you gambled it away at a casino. Linda began crying, the weight of her husband's crimes finally breaking through her denial. Marcus, tell him the truth. Tell him about the other accounts. Shut up, Linda. What other accounts? I demanded. Through her tears, Linda revealed that Marcus had been hiding money in accounts under his children's names, skimming cash from their hardware store, even stealing from his church's building fund. The scope of his theft was staggering. That's when we heard the vehicles pulling into my driveway. Car doors slamming, heavy footsteps on my front porch. Marcus's face went gray with terror. Vincent, he whispered. The loud bang that shook my house was Vincent Torino kicking open my front door. 2 large men flanked him as he entered my living room, surveying the scene with cold calculation. Well, well, Vincent said, his voice carrying a slight accent that made every word sound dangerous. Marcus Thompson, you've been avoiding my calls. Marcus seemed to shrink into himself, his earlier bravado completely gone. Vincent, I can explain everything. I'm sure you can. In fact, someone already explained quite a bit to me. Something about family money, about bigger scores coming up. Vincent's eyes moved to me. You must be the brother-in-law. I stood slowly, keeping my hands visible. I'm Edward. This is my house. Vincent nodded approvingly. Smart man, calling me about Marcus's activities. Saved me considerable time tracking him down. Vincent, please, Marcus begged. I've got the money. Edward's investing with me. I'll have everything by Monday. Vincent laughed, a sound like glass breaking. Marcus, you've told me that story 12 different ways over 6 months. But this gentleman here, he told me something interesting. He told me you already stole money from him this week. Money you should have used to pay me. The confrontation was escalating beyond my control. Vincent's men positioned themselves between Marcus's family and the door, making it clear nobody was leaving until Vincent got satisfaction. Here's what's going to happen, Vincent continued. Marcus owes me $43,000, plus interest and penalties. We're now at $60,000. I'm a reasonable businessman, so I'm willing to accept alternative arrangements. What kind of arrangements? I asked, knowing I was walking into dangerous territory. Marcus has been lying about his assets. But you, Edward, you seem like an honest man. Maybe we can work out something that protects innocent people while ensuring I get paid. Vincent's proposal was about to change everything. But before he could continue, I heard more vehicles in my driveway. Through my front window, I saw government plates and knew the final phase of my plan was about to unfold. Marcus was about to learn that stealing from family had consequences far beyond Vincent Torino's threats. The front door opened again, but this time it was FBI agent Rachel Martinez entering with her badge clearly displayed. She'd been positioned in my kitchen for the past hour, recording everything through surveillance equipment I'd helped federal investigators install. Federal agents. Nobody move. Vincent's men immediately raised their hands, recognizing law enforcement authority. Vincent himself remained calm, his experience with legal troubles evident in his measured response. "Agent Martinez," I said, "I believe you've heard everything you need." Marcus stared at me in shock. "Edward, what's happening?" Agent Martinez stepped forward, her voice professional and clear. "Marcus Thompson, you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and operating a racketeering enterprise. You have the right to remain silent." "Federal agents?" Linda whispered. "Edward, how long have they been here?" 3 weeks, I replied. "Since I contacted the FBI about Marcus's interstate fraud activities. Turns out, stealing from family members across state lines makes it a federal crime." Agent Martinez continued reading Miranda rights, while her backup team secured Vincent and his associates. "Mr. Torino, you're also under arrest in connection with an ongoing investigation into illegal gambling operations." Vincent actually smiled as the handcuffs went on. "Can't say I'm surprised. Been expecting this visit for months." Marcus's legs gave out, and he sank into my dining room chair. "Edward, please. I've got kids. I've got a family. So do your victims," I replied. "David had a daughter who needed medical treatment. Aunt Helen had grandchildren she wanted to help through college. You stole their futures, Marcus." Agent Martinez explained that my cooperation with federal authorities had been ongoing since I'd first discovered the pattern of Marcus's thefts. The interstate nature of his crimes, combined with the gambling money laundering, had triggered federal jurisdiction. "The good news," Agent Martinez continued, "is that asset forfeiture laws will ensure full restitution for all victims. Marcus's hidden accounts, the hardware store assets, everything will be seized to compensate the people he stole from." Linda finally found her voice. "Agent Martinez, my children don't know anything about this. Can they be protected? Mrs. Thompson, your cooperation in revealing your husband's hidden assets will be taken into consideration. Your children's welfare is a priority." Through my front window, I watched Sarah's car pull into the driveway. She entered to find federal agents, handcuffs, and her brother sitting in custody. Her face cycled through confusion, shock, and finally understanding. "Edward, you did this," she said quietly. "I did what was necessary to protect innocent people and ensure justice was served." Agent Martinez addressed Sarah directly. "Mrs. Thompson, you provided your brother with access to your husband's financial information. We need to determine your level of involvement in his criminal activities." Sarah looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Edward, I never meant for any of this to happen. I thought they just needed help." "Sarah, you have a choice," I said. "You can testify honestly about what you knew and when you knew it, or you can face charges as an accomplice. But I won't lie to protect criminals anymore, even if they're your family." Marcus's son, Brad, stepped forward, his young face showing courage beyond his years. "Agent Martinez, my dad has been doing bad things for a long time. I want to tell you everything I've seen." The boy's willingness to tell the truth about his father's behavior was heartbreaking and inspiring. Linda made her decision in that moment, choosing to protect her children by cooperating fully with investigators. Over the following hours, the full scope of Marcus's crimes emerged. He'd been stealing from family members, customers, his church, and various business partners for over a decade. The federal investigation revealed a pattern of fraud across 4 states, affecting dozens of victims. My $23,000 was just the latest in a long string of thefts that Marcus had disguised as family emergencies, investment opportunities, or temporary loans. He'd built an entire lifestyle on other people's money while presenting himself as a successful small business owner. Agent Martinez explained that federal prosecutors would seek significant prison time given the pattern of victims and the amounts involved. Marcus's gambling addiction would be considered during sentencing, but wouldn't excuse the systematic nature of his crimes. "Mr. Edward," Agent Martinez said as the arrests were completed, "your cooperation and evidence gathering were instrumental in this case. The recording equipment, the financial documentation, your willingness to wear a wire during meetings, all of it will ensure these victims see justice." As Marcus was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at me one final time. Edward, I'm sorry. I know you won't believe me, but I never wanted to hurt you. Marcus, you didn't just hurt me. You hurt everyone who trusted you. Your parents, your wife, your children, every person whose money you stole. The tragedy isn't that you got caught. The tragedy is that you chose this path in the first place. The house felt strangely quiet after the federal agents and their prisoners departed. Sarah and I stood in our living room, surrounded by the remnants of the investigation, facing the reality that our marriage had survived the worst betrayal either of us could imagine. Edward, Sarah said softly, I need to testify against Marcus, don't I? Only if you want our marriage to survive. I can forgive being manipulated by a master criminal, Sarah, but I can't forgive choosing to protect criminals over doing what's right. She nodded, understanding the crossroads we faced. Our marriage could survive Marcus's betrayal, but only if we rebuilt it on a foundation of complete honesty and shared commitment to justice over family loyalty. The hardest part was over. Now came the work of healing, rebuilding, and ensuring that Marcus's victims received the justice they deserved. 6 months later, Marcus's federal trial concluded with a conviction on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 8 years in federal prison, citing the systematic nature of his crimes and the devastating impact on his victims. The courtroom was packed with family members Marcus had victimized over the years. Cousin David testified about losing his father's inheritance money meant for his daughter's cancer treatments. Aunt Helen, now 82, explained how Marcus's theft had forced her to sell her home and move in with strangers. But the most powerful testimony came from Marcus's own son, Brad. Now 17, he spoke clearly about his father's pattern of manipulation, lies, and theft that had poisoned every family relationship. My father taught me that family loyalty was the most important thing, Brad said from the witness stand. But he used that loyalty as a weapon to hurt people who loved him. Real family loyalty means protecting each other from predators, even when that predator is your own father. Linda had divorced Marcus 6 months earlier and testified for the prosecution. Her cooperation had revealed hidden bank accounts containing over $70,000 in stolen money, ensuring full restitution for all victims plus damages. The federal asset forfeiture process returned my $23,000 within 90 days, allowing me to stabilize my business and restore my employees' confidence. But more importantly, every other victim received complete restitution from Marcus's seized assets. David used his recovered inheritance money to finally pay for his daughter's medical treatments. Aunt Helen bought a small apartment and regained her independence. The church Marcus had stolen from used their recovered funds to complete their building project. My construction business, Reliable Foundations, became stronger than ever. Word of my integrity during the crisis spread throughout our community, leading to several major municipal contracts. Clients appreciated working with someone who'd chosen justice over family loyalty when faced with the ultimate test. Sarah and I attended marriage counseling for 8 months, working through the damage Marcus's manipulation had caused. She testified against her brother at trial, choosing our marriage and moral integrity over misplaced family loyalty. The experience was painful but ultimately strengthened our relationship. Edward, she said one evening as we reviewed contractor bids for a new municipal project, I understand now why you couldn't just let Marcus's theft go. It wasn't about the money. It was about protecting other people from being victimized. Sarah had started attending a support group for families of white-collar criminals, helping her understand how Marcus's manipulation had affected everyone around him. She'd been as much a victim as anyone else, used as an unwitting accomplice in his schemes. We established new financial protocols in our marriage: joint account monitoring, shared access to all financial information, and regular discussions about money decisions. Trust had to be rebuilt through transparency and accountability. Brad and his sister maintained their relationship with us, visiting regularly despite their father's crimes. Linda found work at a credit union, using her banking experience to help fraud victims navigate financial recovery. The kids were resilient, choosing to learn from their father's mistakes rather than repeat them. I began speaking at community events about recognizing and preventing family financial abuse. Law enforcement agencies invited me to share my experience with other fraud victims, helping them understand that seeking justice wasn't betrayal but protection. The hardest thing about family financial abuse, I told audiences, is that victims feel guilty for seeking justice. We're taught that family loyalty means protecting each other, even from consequences. But real love sometimes means allowing people to face the results of their choices. The case led to new state legislation strengthening penalties for financial abuse between family members. Marcus's systematic theft had highlighted gaps in existing laws that prosecutors could now address. Jake, my 60-year-old foreman, became more than an employee during this period. His unwavering support during the crisis, his understanding when payroll was delayed, and his loyalty when other contractors tried to poach my workers, earned my deep respect and friendship. "Edward," Jake said as we completed a major school renovation project, "what you did took real courage. A lot of men would have just absorbed that loss and moved on. But you fought for what was right, even when it cost you." My relationship with Sarah's parents required careful rebuilding. They'd been as shocked as anyone to learn about Marcus's crimes, genuinely believing their son was helping the family through medical financial crisis. Their cancer treatments were ultimately covered through legitimate assistance programs I helped them access. Agent Martinez told me the federal case had become a model for investigating family financial fraud. The evidence-gathering techniques, the use of recording equipment, and the cooperation between victims had created a template for future prosecutions. "Mr. Edward," she said during our final interview, "your case proved that family financial predators can be stopped when victims refuse to stay silent." Marcus had been stealing for over a decade because his previous victims chose family loyalty over justice. You broke that cycle. 9 months after Marcus's arrest, Vincent Torino was convicted in the gambling operation investigation and sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. His organization had been victimizing gambling addicts across 3 states, using threats and violence to collect debts. The interconnected nature of both cases showed how Marcus's gambling addiction had fed into a larger criminal enterprise. His theft from family members hadn't just hurt individual victims but had supported organized criminal activity. As Marcus's sentencing hearing concluded, the judge made remarks that captured the broader lesson of the case. "Mr. Thompson," Judge Harrison said, "you exploited the trust of family members who loved you. You used their compassion as a weapon against them. Your crimes weren't born from desperation but from selfishness and a fundamental disregard for other people's welfare. The sentence reflects not just the money you stole but the trust you destroyed and the lives you damaged." Walking out of the federal courthouse that day, I felt a deep sense of closure. Justice had been served, victims had been compensated, and a dangerous predator had been removed from our community. But the most important outcome was personal. I'd learned that true strength wasn't about avoiding conflict or preserving false peace. True strength was standing up for what was right, protecting innocent people, and refusing to enable destructive behavior even when it came from family. The experience had tested every principle I'd built my life and business upon. In the end, those principles had proven strong enough to withstand the worst betrayal imaginable and had guided me toward decisions that protected others while preserving my own integrity. 2 years after Marcus's conviction, I stood in the conference room of Reliable Foundation's new headquarters, looking at architectural plans for our largest project yet, a 50-unit affordable housing development for senior citizens. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was using profits partially generated by refusing to be victimized to help vulnerable people find safe, stable housing. My business had grown by 40% since the federal case concluded. Clients throughout East Texas sought out contractors with proven integrity, and my reputation for choosing principle over profit had become my greatest marketing asset. "Mr. Edward," said Mrs. Patterson, the Housing Authority Director, "this project represents exactly what we hope to find. A contractor who understands that building homes means building communities." Sarah entered the conference room, carrying coffee and wearing the smile that had first attracted me 8 years ago. Our marriage had not only survived Marcus's betrayal, but had grown stronger through the process of rebuilding trust and establishing genuine transparency. "How's the presentation going?" she asked, settling beside me as we reviewed construction timelines. Mrs. Patterson was just explaining how the Housing Authority chose Reliable Foundations for this project, I replied. "Your husband's reputation for integrity made this an easy decision," Mrs. Patterson continued. When we researched potential contractors, everyone mentioned the same story. How Edward chose justice over family loyalty. How he protected his employees and other victims even when it cost him personally. After Mrs. Patterson left, Sarah and I drove to our weekly dinner with Brad, now 19 and studying business ethics at Texas A&M. Marcus's son had transformed his father's criminal legacy into motivation for living with absolute honesty. Uncle Edward, Brad said over barbecue at our favorite restaurant, my ethics professor asked me to speak to her class about white-collar crime's impact on families. Would you help me prepare? Of course. What angle do you want to focus on? How victims can protect themselves and others. How choosing temporary peace over permanent justice just enables more crime. Brad had grown into a remarkable young man, using his father's failures as lessons in how not to live. His sister had chosen a different path, studying social work to help families recover from financial abuse. Linda had rebuilt her life completely, finding love with a man who appreciated her honesty about her past and her commitment to helping fraud victims. She'd become a passionate advocate for financial literacy education, speaking at banks and community centers about recognizing manipulation tactics. The most unexpected development had been my growing friendship with some of Marcus's other victims. David and I now work together on construction projects, combining his electrical expertise with my general contracting skills. Our shared experience had created a bond stronger than blood relationship. Aunt Helen, now 84, had become like a grandmother to Sarah and me. Every Sunday, we picked her up for dinner and conversation. Her wisdom about forgiveness and justice had helped guide my own healing process. Edward, she said during one of our weekly dinners, you gave me back more than my money. You gave me back my faith in justice. For 2 years I thought I was foolish for trusting Marcus. You showed me that the foolishness wasn't in trusting but in staying silent after being betrayed. My weekly speaking engagements at community centers, churches, and law enforcement conferences had evolved into a passion project. I'd helped dozens of families recognize financial abuse and take appropriate action. Many had avoided losing their life savings because they'd heard my story and recognized similar patterns in their own situations. The Victim Assistance Fund I'd established had grown to over $200,000, funded by donations from grateful families who'd recovered stolen money after following my advice. The fund provided immediate assistance for basic needs while victims pursued legal remedies. The key thing to remember, I told audiences, is that financial predators count on family loyalty to protect them from consequences. They use love as a weapon. Real love sometimes means allowing people to face the results of their choices. Agent Martinez had been promoted to head the FBI's white-collar crime unit for North Texas, partly based on the success of Marcus's prosecution. She occasionally called for advice on family financial abuse cases, using my experience to help train other investigators. Edward, she said during a recent consultation, your case changed how we approach family financial crime. Victims don't have to choose between family loyalty and justice. They can protect both innocent family members and future victims by refusing to enable criminal behavior. Jake had become my business partner, buying a 20% stake in reliable foundations with money he'd saved over 30 years of construction work. His experience and my administrative skills created a partnership that benefited everyone involved. You know what I learned from all this? Jake said as we reviewed payroll for our 32 employees. Sometimes the most loyal thing you can do for someone is refuse to help them destroy themselves. Marcus needed consequences, not enablers. Sarah's parents had relocated to Texas, living in a small house we'd helped them purchase after their medical bills were resolved through proper channels. Her father's cancer was in remission, and both parents had learned to recognize manipulation tactics that had made them vulnerable to Marcus's schemes. Edward, Sarah's mother said during a recent family dinner, I owe you an apology. We raised Marcus to believe that family loyalty meant protecting each other from consequences. You taught us that real love sometimes requires tough choices. The most profound change had been in my understanding of what family actually meant. Blood relationships didn't automatically create family bonds. Trust, respect, shared values, and mutual support created family. Marcus had forfeited his place in our family through his choices, while people like Jake, Tony, and Agent Martinez had earned places through their actions. 3 years after the federal trial, Marcus wrote me a letter from prison. He'd completed addiction counseling, earned his GED, and was working in the prison library. His letter expressed genuine remorse and acceptance of responsibility for his crimes. "I understand now that I used family loyalty as a weapon," he wrote. "I exploited people's love for me to steal their security and peace of mind. You were right to stop me, Edward. I needed consequences to learn that my actions had victims. I hope someday to earn forgiveness, but I understand if that's not possible." Sarah and I discussed whether to respond to Marcus's letter. After much consideration, we decided that forgiveness was possible, but restored relationship would require years of demonstrated change and genuine restitution beyond court-ordered payments. "Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending his crimes didn't happen," Sarah said. "It means choosing not to let his destructive choices continue poisoning our lives." Brad graduated summa cum laude with his business degree and joined Reliable Foundations as a project manager, specializing in affordable housing development. His father's crimes had motivated him to use business skills for community benefit rather than personal enrichment. "Uncle Edward," Brad said during his first week of work, "I want to spend my career building things that help people rather than tearing down what others have built. Dad showed me what not to do. You've shown me what's possible when someone chooses integrity over easy money." The affordable housing project was completed 6 months ahead of schedule and under budget. The 50 senior citizens who moved into their new homes included 2 of Marcus's victims, David's mother and a church member whose building fund contribution had been stolen. At the dedication ceremony, Mrs. Patterson presented Reliable Foundations with a Community Service Award, recognizing our commitment to ethical business practices and community development. "This project represents more than construction," she said. "It represents the principle that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult, creates benefits that extend far beyond immediate circumstances." As I stood before the crowd of senior citizens, city officials, and construction workers who'd helped complete the project, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. Marcus's theft had threatened to destroy my business, my marriage, and my faith in family loyalty. Instead, it had taught me that true strength came from protecting others, that real love sometimes required difficult choices, and that justice served with integrity created healing for entire communities. The final lesson came from watching Brad receive his first paycheck as a Reliable Foundations employee. Marcus's son had chosen to build rather than steal, to contribute rather than take, to earn rather than manipulate. His father's failures had become the foundation for his own success. "You know what I learned from all this?" I told the crowd at the housing dedication. "Family isn't just about blood relationships. Family is about the people who choose to build each other up rather than tear each other down. Family is about protecting each other from harm, even when that harm comes from within. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive choices." The applause that followed wasn't for my words, but for the principle they represented. Justice served with integrity, love expressed through accountability, and strength demonstrated through protection of the innocent. As Sarah and I drove home from the dedication ceremony, past the hardware store that Linda had sold to pay restitution, past the church that had rebuilt their building fund, past the houses of neighbors who'd learned to recognize financial manipulation through my speaking engagements, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Marcus's betrayal had been intended to destroy my success and steal my security. Instead, it had taught me the difference between temporary wealth and lasting integrity, between false loyalty and genuine love, between avoiding conflict and protecting justice. Most importantly, it had shown me that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the best thing you can do for others. Marcus's crimes had created an opportunity to protect future victims, strengthen community bonds, and demonstrate that ordinary people could choose justice over convenience when faced with extraordinary betrayal. The construction business I'd named Reliable Foundations had become exactly that, a foundation for community development built on the principle that doing the right thing, even when it cost everything, created benefits that lasted far beyond immediate circumstances. Have you ever faced a situation where family loyalty conflicted with doing what was right? How did you navigate the choice between protecting someone you loved and protecting innocent people from their harmful actions? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own experiences. Subscribe for more stories about finding strength through adversity and building meaningful lives through principled choices. Share this story with someone who might need to hear that choosing justice over false loyalty is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. Thank you for listening, and remember that your integrity is your most valuable asset, worth protecting no matter what it costs.